Hi guys, and welcome back to another one of my Python for Beginner tutorial videos. So in this one, I'm going to be looking at classes and object-oriented programming. Um, you will need to know everything that I've done beforehand. Um, so for example, functions, you're going to need to know about data types, just so you can, just because classes implements that. So classes are code that you use to create objects which are like extra data types. You could think of them of as that are used to represent things. So that could be anything from person to user to animals. Um, so they sort of are used to describe the properties and functions of a thing, and then you can use those things in your code to easier bundle together data and functions that are related to each other. That being said, let's hop into the IDLE and get cracking with some code. So the first thing that I want to address is what is object-oriented programming? Okay, object-oriented programming is a method of programming that uses objects. Surprise, right? So the better question to ask is, what is an object? So an object is a container to contain lots of data about a single thing called an entity. Okay, so say for example, you want to describe a person. Okay, you want to store data about a person. So what information do you want to store about them that you then want to be able to use? So a person, what do they have? They have a first name, a surname. May have middle names. They will have, um, you know, a vast array of information about them. So you can store that as a list of dictionaries, but that's not good data management. And it also means that you have to create functions for everything. Okay, or you have to manually do, all your code has to be in one place under one name. You know, it can get messy when you're dealing with lots of different kinds of things. So say you want to store information about people, about pets, about animals, about um, you know, anything basically. So anything that you want to store information about, well, now you've got to you end up with thousands of lines of code that you don't need all in one place. Right? That isn't what you want. So what you can do instead is you can create objects. So the way you do this in Python um, is you create things called classes. So a class is it is just a container for how to build the object and how it allows you to write in what functionality that object has. So in Python, the way you do this is you just say class, you give it a name. So we're going to be saying about person, and then you use a semicolon. Um, you can there's a thing called inheritance, but I'll get onto that in a little bit. But the most basic way you can do this, like create an object, is just say class, the class name, and then you have something called a constructor. Okay, so a constructor is the way that you initially build contents of an object, or you initially assign some attributes, or you initially do something when you create the object. Okay, so this is called, this is the way you create these functions inside of a class is the exact same way you do it in your main code. Okay, so you just say def, and then the constructor, it uses this thing called I'll type it out, it uses this. Okay, so this here is a built by having this underscore before and after, it identifies it as being a built-in method that you don't actually have to call at any point usually. Okay, there are a few cases where you do, like where you are saying that this is of a particular type, then you would have to say that type dot init, you know. But this is just so when you initialize this person class, you then want to give it data, and this always, no matter what, if you want this function to be called on an object rather than just with the class, you're gonna have to use like you're gonna have to type in the word self. Okay, self when you call the function. So when you create the person, you don't have to type in that or that variable's name. Okay, this is by default passed into this function. Okay, by default, but you still need to type it. Okay, so this, if you're familiar with any other language, usually it's called this. But in Python, it is a really, if you're doing object oriented with Python, everyone uses self. Okay, it's just kind of like a standard that's done. So we're going to say def init self, and then what we're going to want to give it, we're going to want to give it a first name, a surname, or a second name, and a height, maybe. So once we've done that, we can now go to this new line, and now this is where you do stuff with that data and using this self. Okay, so like I said, self references the variable that you have, and just like with your basic kind of data, you can actually assign data to the object, and the way you do that is you just say self dot first name equals first name. Okay, so basically what that's saying is that you can say you created, let's just create an object, right? So no, let's not do that. Let's quickly just pop in this second name and height. So self dot second name equals second name, and self dot height is equal to height. So now we've said what the first name and second name and the height is, right? When we create this person, we can now actually go ahead and create a person. So this is why this is really important. Right, so what you do is you just say whatever name you want to give this person. In this case, I'm just going to call it person with lowercase. You set it equal to an object with the name person, and then you pass in this data here. Okay, the first name, the second name, and the height. So I'm just going to say Brad Hastings 1.8, so I'm 1.8 meters tall. Now, if I was to save this and run it, okay, so I've just saved that, and I'm going to run this now. Cool, it works. Now, what I can do, just because this code here is already loaded into my shell, I can just say person.name. Okay, there's no attribute name, okay, but there is person.firstname, but lowercase b. There we go. See, it's sorted as Brad. There's also person.last name. What do I call it? Surname? No, I'll call it second name. Person.second name. person.height. Okay, so as you can see, you can access that data and nothing else because you haven't set it. So that is how you then use that thing, right? So you can also use that just inside of here like normal. So 0, 1. So this can be the username. So the first name, the second name is the height. So 2 different places, meters tall. And format that to be person dot first name, person dot second name, person dot height. Cool. So you can run that. It just says Bradley Hastings is 1.8 meters tall, which is neat. But one thing you can do is, now I said you create functions inside of here, which are called methods, and I'll call them that from now on. You can do that for anything. So say you wanted to be able to describe, so like this is the description, right? This may be something that you want to do at multiple point in your program. Okay, so what you can do is you can just create a function def describe, passing in the self, just so that because it is something that you're going to be calling on person, and then you can just copy this and paste it in there. Okay, but now we don't actually have a person inside of it. But if I was to run this, if I was to say person.describe, okay, somehow that worked, which you shouldn't have done. That was likely due to the fact that I have created person here. If I was to say person2, person2 equals person test, look, test base is 2 meters tall. There you go. And then if I just change person2 dot describe, it still gives the same thing, right? Because this is referencing a hard name. What we actually wanted to do is we want this to describe the object's self. So just change that to self. And I'm also just going to include person.describe. Oh, and I forgot the open bracket. There we go. Brad Hastings is 1.8 meters tall. Testnet test face is 2 meters tall. Right. So that is really basics about what you can do with this. Now, what I'm going to show you is something called inheritance. Okay. So inheritance is the way that you create almost child elements of this class here. And I'll show you what I mean by that. And that probably wasn't the best way to say it, but say for example, you are going to have students and teachers. Both of those are people. Both of them are going to have first name, second name, height. You could describe them. So, but they also have different things that they can do. For example, teachers may have classes or classes of students, right? So they're going to have a list of students, okay? Whereas students aren't going to have classes, so they are not going to have that. So you can't really have that in person. Also, not all people are students or teachers, but all students and teachers are people. So the way you can do this is you could manually say class students you can create the init method with self. You can copy all of this if you so wished, right? And there is technically nothing wrong with that. But if if this student has already got all of this stuff, well, why not just say that this is that? So the way you do that is you actually just you pass in a name of a class that you wish this to inherit from. An inheritance is this whole thing in object-oriented programming where you take everything from one class and you put it into another. So in this case, if I was to type in person in here, everything that's inside of here, student can do. So I could actually get rid of this, starting path, and then I could actually make both these students. Right? But I'll keep I'll keep this one as a person and myself as a student. Right? I could run this. It would still work. Okay, because this student here has copied over effectively this code and moved it into here. Okay. I use this pass just because if you want to stub out some code to say you wanted to create a student class and you wanted to create a teacher class and a person class, then what you can do is you can just type out this and it won't break the code. If I didn't have this pass, it's expecting code, but it hasn't got it. So that's just something to bear in mind. But the reason you're going to want, the way that you extend this, okay, is you still create a def in it. You still pass in self, and first name, and second name, and height. What you also do is you can then pass in other stuff, okay? So you could say, I don't know, year group, right? So you want to know what year group that student is in, okay? And you can just say, now this is the cool bit. What you can actually do is you can directly call this function of person, this method of person. Okay? So you can say person dot init self first name second name height. Okay, and you could just say self dot year group is equal to year group. Okay, so what that means is you didn't actually have to type all this in again. You didn't have to do this describe again. Okay, but what you could then do is what's happened is you've had to do all this again, get all this, put this information back in again. You've added data, and you've said, well, rather than me typing all this out and maybe forgetting something, well, I'll just do it with this data. Okay, so this kind of calling is called static. Okay, so this is like a static reference to the class because what you're doing is rather than referencing an object or like a particular instance of the object, so a particular variable, what you're actually saying is, I want to actually ask the class, this thing that creates my objects, I'm going to ask to use its init function, right? I'm going to ask to use this code here, okay? And I'm going to give it the data it wants, okay? And it will do it for me. And because I've passed in self here, it will put self there, and it will still work. Okay, it will then say the first name of whatever object you create using this will have the first name, second name, and height of the values that you give it. Right. And it will also still have this describe. But we're also going to want to overwrite that describe as well. So, because now they have a year group, so we can say def describe self, and we can say person dot. But we're just going to have to overwrite this. So what we can do is we can just we can change this so it returns a value, so it returns that string. Okay, so it's more of a description. So let's change this to get description. Okay, and then we're also going to have to say, I was just going to change this here. And we're just going to print these values. So we're going to actually have to output them ourselves. And now what we can do is, I'm just going to say get description here. And we're overwriting this. So we're actually going to return person dot get description, passing in self, plus some more information. So plus and is in year plus this dot year group. In this case, it didn't really make much sense to use the formatting, just because it was going right on the end anyway. Although actually, dot format, I'm actually going to put full stop in the end. Cool. So now if I was to run this, right, I forgot to add the year group in here. So they're just going to be in year 12. Right, so let's just say they're in like their first year of college. That's my other programming coming into my other programming experience coming into play. Let's just make sure I haven't used this elsewhere. Cool, I haven't. Yeah, like I said, quite a lot of other languages use this rather than self. There we go. So Brad Hastings is 1.8 meters tall and is in year 12. Test test face is 2 meters tall. Right? So as you can see, I used the same line of code other than changing the name, get description, but it gave me different results. Right? So that is basically all you need to know for object-oriented programming within Python. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do with it. It's a lot more diverse than this, but this is all you actually need to implement it. So everything that you can do with the code that I've already shown you, such as generators, for example, functions, statements of various kinds, they can all be used inside of here. One thing to always bear in mind, though, is that if you're creating a method or a function, if you're creating a functional method for that you're going to call on an object, for example, person.getDescription, okay, do not forget this self here, okay, because even though you're not typing it here, because you are calling it on this person. So you're saying person dot get description with a lowercase p. You're saying this function needs to know what self is, right? So who asks for this information? Okay, so then it will automatically put person inside of there. Also, if you want to just call the function on this person, so if you want to say capital P person, then what you would do then is you would not include self, okay? And you'd also type in this code here at static method, just to kind of describe this function, saying it is a static method. Right, so that's it for this video. I hope you learned something, and if you didn't, at least refreshed some of what you knew. So if you did enjoy it, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to my channel. Yeah, all of that would be greatly appreciated. As right now I'm really trying to grow my channel. Um, so yeah, I'll see you in the next video where I will be going through these things called modules and how you can use them and how you can create your own, which is where this using classes is really helpful. So yeah, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheerio.